Let's start off with this incredible increase that we saw in M&A activity in 2010 in South Africa. I alluded to 133% increase since the highest level that we've seen since 2008. Large cap deals totaling around $11.5 billion. It's the highest since the pre-crisis level of 19.1 billion in 2007. But we still have some way to go before we catch up to those pre-crisis levels, it seems.
Yes, absolutely. South Africa recorded a successful year in 2010. As you were saying, according to merger market data, we had an increase of 133%. And it reflects more or less the activity that we had globally and at European level. Globally, we had an increase of 20% and European level of 27%. The percentage of increase in large deals has been significant as well. As you were saying, we had 8 large deals with value of over $500 million. This is the best sign to see that there are activities at large levels, so companies are confident to make big acquisitions. One factor that is important to notice is that there is more competition as well. There are more companies willing to make acquisition in South Africa. Out of the 15 billion that you were saying earlier, at least 6.3 billion were made by companies willing to buy or buying into South Africa. And the fact that other countries around South Africa like Angola or Nigeria or Kenya are increasing makes more competition for South African companies.
It's quite interesting. I mean, when you look at the mid segments, that suffered quite extensively as well. Cross-border M&A activity looking relatively strong, well, a nice recovery. And it's also interesting that domestic merger and acquisition activity declined. Interestingly enough, what is contributing to that?
Yeah, it's a good sign though, because if you look at cross-border, then 50% is quite a strong value for cross-border, and it means that a lot of companies are willing to buy into South Africa what we didn't have before, so it creates more tension. Yes, we have less domestic acquisition, yes, we have lower figure for mid-market transaction, but it's like something temporarily. We are expecting more larger transaction and more transaction to occur, I would say.
Well, Giovanni, I mean, you mentioned the rest of Africa. To what extent is the limelight being taken away from South Africa because some deals just look far better than what they do here in South Africa, perhaps in north of the border, looking into the rest of the continent?
I think it's more a matter of competition. The fact that there are good assets outside South Africa gives the chance for South African companies to make acquisition out there and not only in South Africa. And the fact that there are Chinese companies willing to buy into Africa makes the South African companies more aware that there are other assets out there that can be bought.
Giovanni, what about the fact that looking into 2011, I mean, some are saying that M&A activity is going to be driven by metals, resources, a lot of confidence in the commodity market on a global level because of demand coming through from China and the likes of India. What do you think is going to drive merger and acquisition activity in 2011?
I remember coming here to the show 6 months ago and saying that energy and mining was the hottest sector. But according to merger market data in 2010, the most active sector were financial services, business services and consumer, followed by energy. And we see some expected deals, not only in the energy and mining sector, but in other sectors, like, for example, there were talks that Nedbank might be sold this year, the South African Airways might be privatized this year, the potential sale by in the Bears by the Oppenheim family. So not only energy transaction, that's the best sign that M&A is picking up at all levels.
And Giovanni, do you think we'll still see a big interest in fast-moving consumer goods? I mean, telecommunications also under the spotlight last year. Do you think it's also going to be something going forward into 2011?
Yes, absolutely, because there are other transactions in countries near South Africa in those sectors. So if South African companies will take those opportunities, there will be consolidation at South African level.
Rand Merchant Bank on top of the Financial Advisor League tables for value and for the number of deals that we saw. I mean, just some of the big deals, Data, the likes of Momentum and Metropolitan. Who do you think is going to take the limelight in 2011?
I think when I go and talk in other countries, the local banks are the strongest one for what it counts for the number of deals, but the foreign banks are quite strong in terms of value. So we're probably going to see Rand Merchant Bank taking like a leading role for 2011, but the European and American banks will also have the lion's share. For example, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Deutsche Bank.
Giovanni, looking at 2010, I mean, we mentioned the number $15.7 billion in 2010. There's a lot of excess liquidity globally. We're seeing the second round of quantitative easing too. To what extent could we see more coming into South Africa and into the rest of the continent?
I think, again, the Chinese companies will be the driver for 2011, and Indian companies as well, but that will spur consolidation across the whole region and not only South Africa.